Dr. Alex Chen had a problem, and that problem was that he could not stop staring at Lith's posterior. This was extremely unprofessional, deeply embarrassing, and something he'd been trying desperately to control for the past 3 weeks without success. He worked as a xenobiology researcher on Concordia Station, where dozens of species interacted daily for trade, research, and cultural exchange. His job involved studying cross-species biology with clinical detachment and scientific objectivity, which made his current fixation completely inappropriate. Lith was Varani, a species recently introduced to the larger galactic community. Humanoid in basic structure, but with distinctive long ears that expressed emotion through subtle positioning, elegant proportions, and apparently, at least in Lith's specific case, a figure that Alex's hindbrain found completely distracting despite all his professional training. He knew it was inappropriate. He tried everything to stop, focusing intently on his work, avoiding common areas when she was present, deliberately looking elsewhere whenever they interacted. But somehow his gaze kept drifting back whenever he thought she wasn't paying attention. It wasn't purely physical attraction, though that was definitely a major component. It was also genuine scientific curiosity about Varani physiology, cultural fascination with how her species moved and carried themselves, and the simple reality that Lith was objectively striking by any aesthetic standard he could articulate. Today he was reviewing xenobiology reports in the station's common research area. Lith was across the room discussing something with colleagues, and Alex had glanced over approximately a dozen times in the past hour, always quickly looking away the moment he realized what he was doing. He thought he was being reasonably subtle about it. He was very, very wrong about that. Dr. Chen. Her voice came from directly behind him, making him literally jump in his seat. We need to talk, now, privately. Oh no. She'd noticed. She was offended. He was about to be reported for harassment. His career was effectively over. He followed her to an empty conference room on shaking legs, his mind racing through apologies and explanations, none of which sounded remotely adequate for the situation. She closed the door firmly and turned to face him directly, her long ears angled in a position he didn't yet know how to interpret properly. Why do you keep looking at my butt, human? Her voice was completely steady and direct, no evident anger but clear confrontation happening that made Alex wish the floor would swallow him whole. His brain executed complete shutdown. I didn't intend to. You have looked at my posterior approximately 47 times in the past week. I have counted each instance. Every time you think I am not aware of your observation, but Varani peripheral vision is significantly more developed than human, and our ears detect directional attention through subtle sound cues. Her ears angled in what might be amusement. So I am asking you directly, why this repeated observation? I am so sorry. It's completely inappropriate behavior. I have absolutely no excuse. I'll request immediate transfer to a different project so we don't have to work in proximity. Alex was mortified beyond any prior experience in his entire life. I was not expressing anger or demanding transfer. I was asking for explanation of your motivation. She tilted her head slightly, ears shifting to clear curiosity. Is this human mating interest, cultural fascination, scientific observation? I genuinely wish to understand the reason. It's all of those things. Maybe. I honestly don't know anymore. Alex had never been this embarrassed. You're Varani. Your species' physiology is different from humans in ways that are both scientifically interesting and aesthetically appealing to human sensibilities. I was attempting to observe professionally, but apparently failing catastrophically at maintaining appropriate boundaries. I'm genuinely, deeply sorry. You find Varani physiology aesthetically appealing, specifically my physiology. Her ears angled distinctly forward with what was definitely interest now. Yes, very much so, which I absolutely know is inappropriate when we work together professionally, and I should have significantly better self-control than I've demonstrated. Why is it inappropriate to find a colleague aesthetically appealing? Is this a specific human cultural taboo I should understand? She seemed genuinely confused rather than offended, which somehow made the situation even more surreal. It's inappropriate because it makes you uncomfortable and creates a hostile work environment if I'm making you feel objectified or reducing you to physical attributes. I do not feel uncomfortable. I feel curious about the nature of your interest and somewhat flattered by such consistent attention, actually. Her ears communicated something he was learning might indicate pleasure. Varani culture is quite direct about attraction and interest. If you find someone appealing, you simply say so directly rather than engaging in furtive observation that you think is subtle, but is actually quite obvious to the observed party. You're not offended that I've been staring at you repeatedly. I am puzzled by the extreme indirectness. Varani observe what interests us openly. If I find someone appealing, I look directly and express that interest verbally when appropriate. Your human tendency to look secretly and then experience profound shame about completely natural attraction is genuinely confusing to me. She moved closer. You find me attractive, yes. Yes, extremely so. Both intellectually because I find Varani culture fascinating, and physically because you're beautiful by any standard I can articulate. Alex figured if she was asking this directly, he might as well answer with complete honesty. But I genuinely thought that was one-sided interest and completely inappropriate to express, given our professional relationship. Why would it necessarily be one-sided? Her ears angled with unmistakable interest. I have been observing you as well, though apparently with more subtlety than you observe me. I find human physiology interesting from scientific perspective. I find your mind engaging from intellectual perspective. I find you attractive in ways that translate across our species differences. Did you genuinely not notice my observation? I had absolutely no idea you were interested in any capacity. I thought I was being creepy, and you were about to report me to station administration. Alex's entire understanding of the situation was being reconstructed in real time. Varani do not report attraction as harassment unless advances are unwelcome after direct verbal refusal. You have not made any advances whatsoever. You have simply looked repeatedly while thinking you were being discreet about natural interest. She actually smiled, which transformed her entire expression. I found it genuinely endearing that you tried so hard to be respectful while so obviously being very interested. But direct conversation is significantly more efficient than continued furtive glancing, yes. So you're saying, you're interested in me too, in a romantic capacity. Alex desperately needed confirmation he was understanding this correctly. I am saying I find you appealing across multiple dimensions, and wish to explore whether that interest is genuinely mutual, and could develop into something more significant with time and interaction. Is that romantic interest by human definitional standards? Yes, that's definitely romantic interest by any standard. Then yes, I am interested in you romantically. Also, I remain curious about why human males focus so specifically on posterior regions as primary attraction feature. Varani distribute aesthetic attention more evenly across complete physical form. Your species' apparent fascination with specific anatomical features is culturally interesting from anthropological perspective. Alex actually laughed despite his profound embarrassment. That's an extremely complex question involving evolutionary biology and cultural conditioning that I'm genuinely happy to explain in detail. But first, you're really, truly not angry about me staring at you repeatedly. I am amused, curious, and interested in pursuing relationship with you, not remotely angry. Her ears angled with clear affection. Though I would prefer if future observation was considerably more direct and accompanied by actual conversation rather than secret glancing you think I cannot detect. I find straightforward approach much more appealing than than furtive observation. I can definitely do more direct. Alex felt like his entire world had just shifted. I'm still processing that you noticed me staring, and your response was to ask me out rather than report me. Why would I report someone for finding me attractive when I find them equally attractive? That seems counterproductive to potential relationship formation. Her logic was absolutely sound. Now, shall we continue this conversation over dinner? I am curious to hear your explanation about human posterior fascination. Also, I wish to observe your hands more closely. I find them particularly appealing. You like my hands? Very much, but we can discuss specific attraction features during dinner. Come. Let us be direct about our mutual interest like sensible beings. Alex followed her, his mortification transforming into disbelief that his complete lack of subtlety had somehow led to the best possible outcome. Their relationship developed with refreshing directness after that initial confrontation. Lith's Varani communication style, utterly forthright about feelings, comfortable with direct expression of attraction, helped Alex overcome his human tendency toward indirect signaling and constant assumption about others' thoughts. You are staring at my posterior again, she mentioned casually during one of their early dates at the station's observation deck. I am aware I explicitly said you could look directly, but I remain curious if there is a specific aspect you find particularly compelling beyond general aesthetic appeal. It's mostly that Varani proportions are different from human in ways that are scientifically interesting. Alex started to explain, then realized how absurdly clinical that sounded. Also, you're incredibly beautiful, and I'm very attracted to you, and apparently I stare when I'm attracted to someone. It's involuntary response I'm still learning to moderate. That is considerably more honest answer. Her ears angled with visible approval. Varani also stare at physical features we find particularly appealing. I have been observing your hands extensively since we began spending time together. Human manual dexterity is fascinating from evolutionary perspective, and also I find your hands specifically attractive on aesthetic level. You like my hands? Alex looked at his own hands with new awareness. Very much so. The way you gesture with them when explaining complex concepts, their evident strength combined with precision, their size relative to mine, the way you use them to express emotion unconsciously. Yes, I find your hands genuinely compelling. She demonstrated by taking one of his hands in both of hers. See, direct observation and verbal acknowledgement of attraction. Much more efficient than secret glancing, while hoping the other person doesn't notice. Your culture's directness is actually incredibly refreshing, Alex admitted. Humans spend enormous amounts of time and energy trying to figure out if someone's interested through subtle signals and indirect communication. You just say exactly what you think and feel. Because what is the practical purpose of hiding genuine interest if interest exists mutually? It wastes valuable time and creates unnecessary confusion and anxiety. Her ears communicated pure logic and confidence. I am interested in you. You are interested in me. We acknowledge this reality and explore it directly. This seems obviously superior to your species' tendency toward elaborate indirect communication and constant assumption. They navigated cultural differences with surprising ease and considerable humor. She was endlessly fascinated by human tendencies toward indirect communication and elaborate subtlety. He was learning to deeply appreciate Varani directness and emotional transparency. Why do humans experience shame about completely natural attraction? She asked during one conversation over dinner. You were so profoundly mortified when I asked directly about your observation. Why does your culture create that response? Because we're taught from childhood that staring is rude, that expressing attraction too directly is aggressive or objectifying, that we should carefully control our responses and maintain professional distance in workplace environments. Alex tried to explain cultural conditioning that even he found somewhat arbitrary when examined closely. There's constant concern about making others uncomfortable through unwanted attention. But I was not uncomfortable with your attention. I was simply curious about motivation. If I had been uncomfortable, I would have stated clearly, "Your observation is unwelcome. Please stop immediately." Then, if you continued after direct verbal request to stop, that would be genuine problem requiring intervention. Her ears angled with visible confusion about human communication patterns. Your culture seems to assume discomfort without ever asking directly, then creates profound shame around completely natural responses. This seems remarkably inefficient. It is inefficient, but it comes from genuinely good intent, trying to protect people from unwanted attention and creating safe environments. Alex was starting to see his own culture's patterns more clearly through her eyes, which is admirable intent but creates situation where even wanted attention gets suppressed because people are genuinely afraid to express natural interest directly for fear of negative response. She paused thoughtfully. I strongly prefer our approach. Express interest clearly, receive direct response about whether interest is welcome, proceed accordingly or withdraw gracefully. Much clearer for all involved parties. I'm definitely starting to prefer your approach too, Alex admitted with complete honesty. Being with you has made me realize how much energy humans waste on indirectness and assumption, instead of just communicating clearly about what we actually think and feel. Their relationship deepened steadily over months of navigating cross-species differences with humor, patience, and increasingly direct communication. Alex learned to express interest and feelings more forthrightly. Lith learned to recognize when human indirectness was cultural conditioning rather than personal rejection or confusion. "I love you," Alex said one evening, then immediately worried it was too soon or too direct. "Sorry, was that too much too fast? Should I have waited longer?" "You are apologizing for expressing genuine feeling openly. Why would that require apology?" Her ears angled with pure confusion. "I love you as well. I have felt this for several weeks, but was attempting to understand if humans prefer specific timeline for such declarations. Thank interactions, and am now deeply emotionally attached to you. Is that the appropriate level of directness by human standards?" "That's perfect level of directness. I love you too, so much." He kissed her, marveling at how easy genuine honesty made everything. "Good. Then we have established mutual love openly, much better than assuming or wondering." Her ears communicated pure contentment. Your species' tendency toward indirect communication about feelings seems designed to create maximum anxiety and confusion. I prefer our approach significantly. Alex couldn't argue with that assessment at all. Continuing their relationship development, planning their bonding ceremony. 2 years into their relationship, they were planning permanent bonding according to both human marriage customs and Varani partnership traditions. "Do you remember when you confronted me directly about staring at you?" Alex asked during one of their wedding planning sessions. "I was so absolutely mortified. I genuinely thought my entire career was over and that you despised me." "I was genuinely curious about your motivation and mildly amused by your catastrophically terrible attempts at subtlety." Her ears angled with fond humor at the memory. "Varani children are considerably more discreet in their observation than you were being. I knew you were interested for at least 3 weeks before I asked you directly. Why did you wait to confront me if you knew I was staring?" "I was observing to determine if your interest was respectful curiosity or something potentially problematic that would require different response. Once I concluded it was genuine attraction combined with scientific interest and fundamental respect for me as person, I saw no reason to delay direct conversation." She took his hand affectionately. "I wanted to know if you were interesting enough to pursue romantically. You absolutely were. I'm genuinely glad I passed your extended observation period." Alex kissed her hand, "though I'm still somewhat embarrassed about the entire staring situation." You should not experience embarrassment about natural attraction expressed through observation. You caused no actual harm, made no inappropriate demands, respected all boundaries before I even needed to state them explicitly. That is completely appropriate behavior. Her ears communicated deep affection, though I still find it highly amusing that you thought you were being even remotely subtle about your interest. In my defense, I was trying very hard to be subtle. You failed comprehensively. It was endearing. She kissed him gently. Your terrible attempts at subtlety are part of why I found you so appealing. Genuine attraction you couldn't quite hide despite trying desperately to be respectful. Very appealing combination. Their bonding ceremony beautifully blended customs from both cultures, human vows about partnership and lifelong commitment, Varani traditions about direct emotional expression, and witness declaration of intent. "I love you," Alex said during his vows, speaking to Lith while their assembled friends and family witnessed. "I fell for you while trying desperately to hide my interest through completely obvious staring that you noticed immediately and counted meticulously. You confronted me with directness that simultaneously terrified and impressed me profoundly. You taught me that clear communication beats assumption and indirectness every single time. Thank you for being direct enough to ask why I kept looking at you. That question started absolutely everything." "I love you," Lith responded in her vows, her ears expressing emotion more clearly than words ever could. "You intrigued me with your obvious interest combined with genuine respectful distance. You impressed me by learning to communicate considerably more directly despite your cultural conditioning toward indirectness. You made me laugh repeatedly by being so mortified about completely natural attraction. Thank you for staring at my posterior repeatedly despite thinking you were being subtle. It gave me perfect excuse to ask directly and discover you were absolutely worth pursuing romantically." Their witnesses laughed at the honest recounting of their unusual beginning, appreciating the humor and directness both of them brought to the ceremony. Years into their marriage, they remained deeply in love, constantly learning from each other's cultural frameworks, building partnership on foundation of direct communication and mutual respect. "Do you still stare at me?" Lith asked one evening, teasing him gently. "Constantly. But now I do it completely openly and tell you you're beautiful instead of trying desperately to hide it." Alex pulled her close. "You taught me that expressing genuine appreciation directly is infinitely better than hiding it out of misplaced shame." "Good, I prefer when you stare openly." Her ears angled affectionately. "And yes, I still notice every single time. Varani awareness is excellent. But now I appreciate it as expression of ongoing attraction, rather than confusing secret observation requiring direct confrontation. Best confrontation of my life. Absolutely terrifying in the moment, but led to everything we have now. Direct communication usually does lead to better outcomes than assumption and indirectness," she observed with typical Varani logic. "Your species should adopt our approach more broadly." "Working on it, you're teaching me every day." They settled together comfortably, living proof that direct communication and willingness to bridge cultural differences could create extraordinarily strong foundations for love that transcended species and customs. Alex had been caught staring. Lith had confronted him directly instead of assuming negative intent. That directness had led to honest conversation, to mutual understanding, to love that thrived on clarity rather than assumption. "Why do you keep looking at my butt, human?" had been the question that started everything. The answer, honest acknowledgement of attraction combined with respect and scientific curiosity, had led to partnership proving that directness beats assumption absolutely every time. Years into their marriage, Alex and Lith had become unlikely advocates for direct cross-species communication, using their relationship's unusual beginning as teaching example in workshops and seminars across Concordia Station. The human asked me why I kept looking at his research notes, a young Varani researcher mentioned during one workshop they were leading together. He seemed genuinely uncomfortable with my sustained observation. I do not understand why this created negative response. Humans often interpret sustained observation without verbal acknowledgement as potentially hostile rather than genuinely interested. Lith explained patiently. Direct verbal acknowledgement helps significantly. Ask what interests them about their work rather than observing silently while they grow increasingly uncomfortable wondering about your intent. But asking directly seems aggressive by human standards from what I have observed. It's actually considerably less aggressive than silent observation that makes them uncomfortable wondering about your motivation, Alex added from his side of the presentation. Humans genuinely appreciate directness when it's clearly framed as curiosity rather than judgment or criticism. Just say something like, "I notice you're working on X topic. I find it interesting. Can you explain your approach?" Much better than staring silently and making them anxious. They taught regular workshops on cross-species communication patterns, using their own relationship as primary example of how directness could bridge enormous cultural gaps. My wife asked me directly why I kept looking at her posterior, Alex would tell audiences with self-deprecating humor. I was absolutely mortified in that moment. But her directness opened genuine conversation that led to relationship neither of us would have pursued if we'd relied entirely on indirect signaling and assumption. Sometimes directness is genuinely the kindest possible approach. My husband spent multiple weeks staring while thinking he was being reasonably subtle, Lith would add with clear affection in her ear positions. Varani noticed immediately. Our peripheral vision and directional hearing made his observation completely obvious. Rather than assuming negative intent or feeling offended, I asked directly for explanation. His embarrassed honesty was genuinely endearing. We learned each other's communication styles through that first direct conversation. It established healthy pattern for our entire relationship. They published papers on cross-species communication, gave interviews about their relationship, became go-to experts when other mixed-species couples needed guidance navigating cultural differences. Years later, a journalist asked Alex during a profile interview, "Do you still stare at your wife after all these years together?" "Yes, constantly and completely openly. But now I do it while telling her she's beautiful instead of trying to hide my attraction out of misplaced shame." He laughed genuinely. "She taught me that expressing genuine appreciation directly is infinitely better than suppressing it. Best lesson I ever learned from anyone." "Do you still notice when he stares at you?" the interviewer asked Lith. "Always. Varani's sensory awareness is excellent. I detect his attention immediately every time. But now I appreciate it as expression of ongoing attraction and affection, rather than confusing secret observation requiring direct confrontation." Her ears angled with visible affection toward Alex. "He looks at me openly, I look at him openly. We acknowledge mutual appreciation directly. Much better than his early catastrophic attempts at subtlety." What would you say to other mixed species, couples struggling with communication? "Be direct," they answered simultaneously, then laughed. Alex continued, "Humans especially, we waste enormous energy on assumption and indirectness. Ask what you want to know, say what you actually feel. The worst outcome is clear answer that lets you move forward appropriately. That's infinitely better than confusion and anxiety. And Varani should remember that humans are not being deliberately obtuse," Lith added. "Their communication patterns are cultural conditioning, not personal rejection or confusion. Patience and clear explanation help bridge the gap significantly." They sat together during the interview, bodies angled toward each other naturally, clearly comfortable and deeply connected after years of partnership built on direct communication and mutual respect. Alex had been caught staring at Lith repeatedly, thinking he was being subtle when he was actually completely obvious to her enhanced Varani perception. Lith had confronted him directly with simple question. "Why do you keep looking at my butt, human?" Instead of assuming negative intent, getting angry, or reporting him for harassment, she'd asked for genuine explanation of his motivation. That directness, that willingness to ask rather than assume, had opened conversation leading to honest expression of mutual attraction that both of them had been experiencing, but neither had verbalized. From that awkward beginning had grown genuine love that transcended species differences through clear communication, cultural learning, and mutual appreciation. "Why do you keep looking at my butt?" had been the question that started everything. The answer, honest acknowledgement of attraction combined with respect, scientific curiosity, and genuine appreciation, had led to partnership proving that directness, honesty, and willingness to bridge cultural gaps created infinitely stronger foundations than